Let's go.
Get ready for transformative power, insightful journeys, and secret unfolding on DrWhitty today with our incredible guest, Champ Franklin Muhammad, whose remarkable journey from the west side of Chicago to a distinguished military career exemplifies resilience and determination. In this episode, we'll explore how embracing vulnerability can transform leadership, foster deeper connections, and drive personal and professional growth. DrWhitty and Champ Franklin will share their unique insights and experiences, offering valuable lessons on leading with authenticity and with courage. Stay tuned for an inspiring conversation that will challenge your perceptions and empower you to lead with heart. Listeners and viewers here and at home, please welcome our host, DrWhitty.
All right. Welcome to DrWhitty today. So glad you could tune in. We got an awesome conversation coming up with my friend Champ Franklin. Champ Franklin, what is going on? Say hello to the listeners and viewers.
Hello, and DrWhitty, thank you so much. Just take podcasting to a whole nother level, and I'm excited to be here to see you and God is good. That's all I can say. And it's a pleasure to be here. I'm honored. So thank you so much.
All right. I had the opportunity to be on Champ Franklin's podcast. We had an awesome conversation. And so I'm just glad that he accepted my invitation. So we're going to be talking about embracing vulnerability as leaders. And so I think this is going to make for a great learning opportunity, not only for us as the host of the podcast today, but certainly the listeners and viewers. And so the way it's going to go is how it always goes. We're going to talk about embracing vulnerability as a leader, and then we are going to take a pause, and we're going to try to invite one or two listeners and viewers onto the stage later on so that you can give us a comment, something that you learned from the show, or if you have a question for myself or Champ Franklin, we're going to invite you on the platform so that you can, give some words, and so that we can know how we are affecting our listeners and viewers. So, Champ Franklin, tell us something about yourself that we did not learn from that awesome introduction.
So one thing, well, thank you again. One thing that you all have not learned about me is that I was on the USS Enterprise, and my deployment was in 2011. And during that time, I was out in the Gulf when Osama bin Laden was captured. And I was on the USS Enterprise, and the USS Carl Vinson was the other aircraft carrier that was a little bit closer in proximity to Osama bin Laden's remains. And so I had a 50-50 chance of being a medical admin officer to process Osama bin Laden's remains. And so the point that I wanted to share that is that that requires leadership, and it requires being poised, and it requires being on a team and responsive, and regardless of what the scenario is or what the situation calls for, that you're able to make the adjustments. And that's something I wanted to share with you.
All right. Well, I did some time down there, about 15 months, as a matter of fact.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
One of the first things I said when I got there is I didn't want to know how much time I had left. You know how you go somewhere and you're like, oh, we only got this amount of time, and you immediately begin counting down. And so I didn't want to imagine counting to 15 months. Now we down to 14, down to 13. I didn't want to do that. So I just wanted everybody to stay focused and then not say anything about going home until we were under 30 days.
Right. Absolutely.
And so, that worked out great for us. But it was, I don't know if incredible is the word, but that's what comes to mind when I think of my experience down there. It was a learning opportunity. It was incredible. It was challenging. It was vulnerable.
Mhm.
It was a whole lot of things, but I wouldn't change that experience for the world. So thank you for your service.
Yeah, thank you for your service too.
All right. All right. So we're going to get into the conversation. We're going to ask you to define vulnerability for us and also explain what vulnerability means in the context of leadership.
Okay, well, perfect. Thank you again for being here. I'm excited. When it comes to vulnerability in relationships, we talked about vulnerability requiring two spaces in order for vulnerability to exist, and that's a brave space where the person is brave enough to share and be vulnerable, and then there's that safe space where the individual who is the receiver is providing that safe space for that individual to be brave. Now, when it comes to leadership, right, vulnerability is the willingness to admit mistakes, share challenges without fear of judgment, and this transparency fosters trust and sets a powerful example for others to follow. And when I think about that, it is so profound. Whereas as a leader, you have to navigate both the brave space and the safe space, right? To make sure that you're not you're setting proper boundaries as well as being an effective leader.
All right. All right. Exactly. I think we talked about brave and the safe space. And we talked about, like you said, the leader, or even if it's not in the context of leadership, it could be in the context of home or whatever. But um, we talked about that safe space being, a certain type of environment that would make someone feel safe enough to be, as you said, vulnerable. And then we also talked about the difference between the safe and the brave space. And we talked about the safe space being a space where the objective is to get support for what learning, support for coping, dealing with something. Um, Not only that, but also learning and development. And then we also talked about the brave space being that the objective of the brave part is because you're trying to discover a particular truth or some knowledge that in the brave space is where, and the reason why we said brave is because that's where you have those difficult, uncomfortable conversations, because that's where people don't want to expose their vulnerabilities or talk about certain subjects. And so that's why we talked about both of those two working in tandem together, because we always hear about, oh, this is a safe space. And it very well might be a safe space, but that doesn't mean that um, we can talk about certain issues, because the vulnerability is the person is not feeling, safe and brave enough to come forward and talk about, to interact with whoever they're interacting with to discover a certain piece of knowledge, information, or truth, as we talked about. So, but I like your definition of vulnerability. I was thinking about vulnerability earlier before we got on the podcast, and I was thinking about how um, the Bible talks about, you know, and hopefully I won't get in trouble for saying this, it's in the Bible, but I'm not talking about it to describe women, but it talks about, recognizing, her as the weaker vessel. And a lot of
Mhm.
times people think that means that, women are weak and stuff like that. And it's not what it means at all. It makes me think of the heart being the most important part, like the heart and the brain. Those are two vital vessels, and yet they are both enclosed by something else. So when I think of the safe space, that's what I think of. Like, you got your heart, you got your brain, but they both are in a space that keeps them what? It keeps them safe from things that are going on the in not only the inside of your body, but also on the outside. If you fall and hit yourself, or somebody tries to do something to you where they puncture your body, those organs are protected. They're in a safe space. And so that's what I think about when we talk about vulnerability, because both of those vessels are pretty vulnerable. And they are, you have the ribs, the rib cage, and then you have the skull. And so that's how I look at that vulnerability. So, so how can vulnerability, how can that help foster trust?
Let's say, so for, let's give you an example. But vulnerability, but by being vulnerable, leaders can they can show value to their teammates, right? And whereas being honest and sharing allows you to have that level of closeness where you all are building trust amongst each other. And when that trust is fostered and supported, it creates a dynamic where individuals are willing to give feedback, when individuals are willing to be more creative and share other ideas. And so that way, it, like some leaders will say, I have an open door policy, where how many times you walk in the door and share with that person, right? But that comes with helping, being vulnerable and having that exchange where individuals can now see you as human, and as someone who actually has feelings, someone who actually cares about the individual's well-being. So that's how you can foster deeper connections.
I'm so glad you mentioned the open door policy, because there are so many leaders that say they have an open door policy. And I never heard it best until I heard someone say that you might have an open door policy, but how many people want to open your door and actually go in and speak to you? And that's the thing, because
Right.
you can have an open door policy all day, but if people don't feel connected to you, they don't feel that they can talk to you or speak truth to you or be vulnerable in front of you, they're not going to use that open door policy at all. So that was great that you talked about that.
And it sets up a culture of trust, where the team actually trusts each other, and they are all focused on the mission, or what our objectives are, and they can be able to share when things are going wrong, or they can share what we call in a high reliable organization as a near miss, where we almost had someone almost got hurt, or we missed a safety situation where information was compromised, if you're in the healthcare field, where someone's data or health information could have been exposed. And so being able to share those near misses in the organization fosters trust and allows individuals to be safety conscious when it comes to being reliable on the team.
Exactly. Do you have what personal story that you can share with us where you were in a leadership role and you had to demonstrate vulnerability?
So I'll give you an example where, two. Well, the example I'm gonna share with you is that being vulnerable, individuals took advantage of me. Whereas I'm sharing and I'm trying to help them to learn and understand the importance of of supply compliance, and sharing with them that I used to be enlisted. I used to be in your shoes, and showing that level of vulnerability. I felt like individuals took it for granted. Well, you were in prior enlisted, so we can just talk to you any kind of way, or we're not going to pay attention to you. And that's something that we have to be careful with sharing and being vulnerable. When it comes the other scenario that I have, um, well, I had but it wasn't mine. But when I think about individuals who are in leadership and who are often vulnerable, we think of Oprah Winfrey, right? She'll tell you about her life or how she was experiencing um, abuse or experiencing some things in her life, and she's being transparent with her audience. She's been transparent with with individuals on her show, and so that's a good way that leaders can be vulnerable. And I think being in a leadership position, that sometimes it can be okay, but you got to be able to know when to be vulnerable and who you're being vulnerable with, right? Whereas you can, being in a leadership position. Well, I'll say this here. As when I was serving in Yokosuka, Japan, as the department head for materials management, there were individuals on my team who I could be vulnerable with, and be able to share what I was truly feeling and experiencing. Whereas there's other individuals who I couldn't share how what my uncertainty was, or what the urgency is in this particular scenario. Whereas, if it was tracking down a supply order, or making sure that we have all of our I's dotted and T's crossed when it comes to processing a purchase order. And so that's where I was able to differentiate who I can be vulnerable with. And in that particular case, when I was in Japan, I had a great trust in my team. Whereas in another scenario, like I shared with you before, those individuals were not having my best interest at heart. So, and those are some of the stories I can share with you.
Great. Thank you for that. As you were talking about it, I was looking at some things I wrote down, and I wrote down vulnerability is not saying everything to just anyone. It's about choosing who to share that vulnerability with. And I think that's what you were just talking about. We excuse me, every leader has to discern who you can talk to, and what you can talk to what you can talk to a person or a group of people about. Because as you said, depending on who you share things with, some people don't have the greatest intentions. Some people are there or around you just to collect knowledge so that they can, go out and use it in ways that don't benefit you. So that's something that leaders definitely have to do. And then on the other hand, vulnerability, as you said, can be a great thing. It can be used as a great learning tool. It can make you more relatable. It can also connect you to the people that you lead, because sometimes people will place you. I like to say there are people who will place you so high up on a pedestal that you couldn't even fall off. And so it's like you have to know that people need to see you not only as a leader, but to some degree, they need to see you as a human being. They need to see you as relatable, that you can relate to their challenges, that you care about them, that you care about their success. And so vulnerability to me, it's all about connection. And leaders that want to connect to their people, they discover areas in their lives where they can be vulnerable. And not only that, but like you said, they have to be willing to be. And that right there is key to you. You have to be willing to be vulnerable, and you have to be willing to be vulnerable, but you also have to be willing to be hurt, because you already know going in that there's a chance that you might be betrayed for whatever vulnerability. It could be something huge, it could be something small. But if you choose to be vulnerable for whatever reason, you also have to choose what could come along with being vulnerable.
And so as you're talking, I'm listening, I'm thinking, as a leader, the space in which vulnerability can exist and flourish is having a mentor that you can talk to about issues that you're having at work, or how do you handle a particular situation when you don't know how to do it, right? And then as a leader leading a team, vulnerability as a leader, the vulnerability that you share has to match the individual's, as let's say, individual's pay grade, right? Right. And that's where that trust, building that trust and allowing them to be able to share without repercussions is really important. So that's where I'm thinking now, as the conversation is unraveling, or evolving, that as a leader, your vulnerability has to, when you don't know something, or you're trying to figure something out, it's important for you to have a mentor, someone who is a subject matter expert in your field, where you can still show that strength as a leader and that guidance. And then also, when it comes to your staff, your team, being able to provide that safe space, right? And then encouraging individuals to be brave enough to be able to share without repercussion, right? And that's that balance right there.
And I just wanted, I'm thinking of what you just said, and it just slipped my mind, my comment. Oh, I know what it was. You were talking about sharing sharing with people according to their pay grade, and I'm gonna add that not just base it upon that, because some people can have your pay grade, but they don't have your maturity level. And so I would add and say that it should be based on a person's maturity level. It should be based on their need to know, um, things such as that. Because if we don't consider all of those things before choosing to be vulnerable, that's where we run into things, such as people using information to discredit us, or to hurt us, or to do something that's just not beneficial to the leader or the organization. And so that's one of the things that we all have to learn. Shoot, I know I've had, excuse me, I've had to learn that. I can see areas in my own life where I was pretty vulnerable, and to be quite truthful, people took that vulnerability and used it in the wrong type of
Oh
way.
my God.
And
Yes.
I don't blame those people. I don't really place blame on myself. But what I recognize is that as we sit here, that you have to be able to discern who you should share things with. Sometimes it's all about timing, because once you do it, or once you're vulnerable with the wrong type of person, it can really be damaging. So it can go either way. You can be vulnerable and it can be great, but then you could also be vulnerable and it could go horribly wrong. And so that's why we're having this conversation. So I thank you for
Yeah,
all
and
of the things
I can share a story um, that happened to me. And one of these scenarios, this situation here, actually contributes to my PTSD, which I was almost triggered, right? That I had to I had to regain myself, and so that I can actually be effective here in the podcast. But here's the thing, right? So when I was on the USS Enterprise, there were times in which individuals were out to end my career, right? Because they didn't appreciate the fact that I was this knowledgeable officer, black guy, who knew his stuff, right? And so it was so the scenario happened, whereas I sent off a message that I was asked to send off, and during the conversation with the senior medical officer, because there was some errors in the message that I didn't know, but I was just following what was in the manual. But there was an updated format for the current situation. You know, with SOPs, sometimes they're outdated and they're using different information that's up to date. And so there was an error. And then so in that particular situation, they counseled me, talked to me about the situation. And then I went to talk to this 06, the captain, who was in our department, who's a brother. And I'm like, hey, I wish that never happened or whatever. And so what things that I would share with him, he would go back to them and then share them about different stuff. And so and then once that happened, things would get out of hand, and then they would lead to more write-ups and then more scrutiny and decrease in responsibilities, and so it gets down to the point where you really have to, as a leader, you have to be careful who you share with, but also making sure that you are providing that safe space for your team members, right? That you want to set that culture where individuals can share and not have people walking on eggshells, fear of repercussions or retaliation, or like we say, reprisals. So you want to make sure that individuals know that when you share something, it's okay. And if you sharing different things about, whatever it is that you want to share that helps the team, help me to better understand you, then that's okay. And that's having that kind of culture, I think breeds creativity and team cohesion. Are you there? Oh my Lord. Oh my gosh. Well, the clock is still going. You're on mute. Uh-oh.
Sorry, I'm having difficulties. I don't know if it's the weather or what. So
No, it is not the weather. Hold on, Dr. Whitty. Hold on. Let me tell you something. It is not the weather. It isn't. And I probably shared this with you. What just happened is a sign that we're in the right space. We're exactly where we're supposed to be, because that technical difficulty has never happened, at least in the last 4, 5, 6 episodes, right? That you just all of a sudden, but because I'm here and the energy, the universe doesn't want me sharing, at this level, stuff like that happens. And I'm happy. I'm glad that to see it happen again. That it wasn't on my end, but I do know that there are forces who are trying to keep me from sharing at the level in which I share. But I'm still here. Like we say, the champ is here.
All right, all right. Thank you, thank you. As you were talking, though, it just made me think about something else, that being vulnerable gives others the opportunity to be vulnerable with you. And so it was something that you were saying, and that's what stood out to me was, as you are vulnerable with someone else, it gives them the opportunity to be vulnerable. And then the other way I would like to say it is, when we are not when we are not vulnerable with the people that we lead, we rob our own selves of an opportunity for them to be vulnerable with us, because they have things to glean from us, but we also have things to glean from them as well. So it's and like we've been talking about, it's all about being able to connect and being able to relate with the people that you lead. And the story that you shared, I'm sure we can all relate to that in some sort of way. So I think we talked about brave space and safe space, but did we say how important it is to create? Yeah, how important it is to create those spaces so that others can be vulnerable and bring their best selves. Because as you were talking earlier and you said the term value, that's another thing that came to my mind as I thought about vulnerability, is that many times our vulnerabilities are our most valuable assets.
Yeah. So one of the things that I've adopted, and I try to apply this to pretty much every situation when it relates to people, and that's Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when we look at taking Maslow's hierarchy of needs and then placing that same triangle, that same hierarchy in the needs of an organization, right? We know the food, water, shelter, warmth, working at the mission. That we know the day-to-day stuff. And then we know that in order that everyone wants to feel like, if you feel like you belong at your job, that there's a sense of loving and belonging at the job and team cohesiveness, you're going to be more effective, right? But the thing is that team connection, that self-actualization of the team optimizing their abilities cannot happen when there is not trust, when that safe space is not there. And so it's really important that we understand that on a team, you have to have a safe space so that individuals can share with you, so that we can build that level of closeness that creates that team cohesiveness, whereas we can optimize our potential. And that's why it's really important as a leader that you set the tone, that you set the culture, that that everyone can be heard. And that just because I'm the boss doesn't mean I'm the expert in the filing system. You know how to file, data coding, process improvement. So you're on the front line. And so I need your feedback, I need your input. And I want to be able to trust that you know how to do it without you feeling like, no, you don't know what you're doing. That ain't how it works. I want you to do it this way. Well, sir, that's not how the customers normally come in here, right? And that's why it's important, because you end up, having an employee check out on you and not, sharing anything with them. I'm gonna just let him find out on his own. And before you know it, it's too late. Right?
Exactly. Thank you for that. All great talking points. What we're going to do right now is we're going to take a little break, but we're going to be right back because we want the listeners and viewers, those of you that are out there, if you have a comment about what we're talking about embracing vulnerability as leaders. If you have a question for myself or Champ Franklin, if you've got a comment about what you are getting from this conversation, we want to put the invitation link in the chat, and we want you to be brave enough, because this is a safe space and it is a brave space. We want you to be bold enough to come on here and talk to us about what you feel about embracing leadership as leaders. So we're going to take a little break and a little pause, but we're going to be right back. And then we're going to drop that link in the chat for you to use and come up and enjoying this conversation. So stay tuned.
Presented by Dr. Timothy Felton and Teron Coleman, Black Boys Matter explore the vital role of parental presence in raising Black sons. As Black boys navigate persistent obstacles and challenges, fostering authentic, trusting, and nurturing relationships through positive engagement becomes crucial. Each chapter of this profound manuscript leaves readers with greater understanding and deliberate techniques for addressing the issues these young men face. Get your copy wherever books are sold. Dr. Candicia Randolph's book, The Black American Church, Leadership Dispensation and Challenges, critically examines leadership within the Black church, drawing from historical and anthropological perspectives. It identifies challenges faced by this vital institution in the Black American community and proposes. Dr. Candicia Randolph's book, The Black American Church, Leadership Dispensation and Challenges, critically examines leadership within the Black church, drawing from historical and anthropological perspectives. It identifies challenges faced by this vital institution in the Black American community and proposes practical solutions. The church's impact on Black culture and leadership is explored, emphasizing its historical context and influence over nearly 5 centuries. Through research and data, the manuscript aims to enhance the church's effectiveness and cultural relevance. Get your copy where books are sold today. Dr. Ian Buchanan, a native of East St. Louis, Illinois, is the CEO of the NIA Education Group. He is deeply committed to servant leadership and addressing inequities. His best-selling book, King, a 4-part leadership framework for Black men, is making waves in the leadership community. His extensive experience spans teaching, school leadership, and advocacy. Pick up your copy of King today wherever books are sold.
All right. We are back. So what we want to do is we want to put up the invitation for anybody that is out there who wants to come and join this conversation. We want to put it up on the screen. We're going to leave it up. And we want you to join this conversation about why it's important that leaders embrace vulnerability. Mr. Franklin, while we're waiting, I'm going to pose another question. Let's see. Talk about the balance between being vulnerable. And I think we talked about it a little bit, but talk about the balance between being vulnerable and then being too common with folks on your team. Talk about what we can do to balance.
Yes, that is a tricky situation. And oftentimes that happens when you are where you've been promoted over your friends, or you have familiarity in a workspace, and you're sharing with individuals, and it becomes we can joke with you, right? We can joke with the boss, and it's all cool. But then those individuals don't know when to turn it off, right? We're in the meeting, and then you're like, "Oh man, come on, boss, quit tripping," right? Like, oh, hold on, who are you serious? Are you really? Did you really just say that right in front of everybody, right? And so it requires it that can compromise good order and discipline, and it's important for you to be able to balance those things and be able to praise in public, but make those corrections in private. Be able to say, hey, listen, let me talk to you later. This is how we're gonna, I need you to not do that when we're in a meeting or when we're in front of individuals, because that's not cool. I still need to be seen as the leader, and I don't need you to do that again. However, if you choose to do that again, there will be repercussions. And that should settle that. And when you have those individuals who don't know when to draw the line. So it is a balancing act. At the same time, you still, as a leader, it is still your responsibility to maintain discipline and order in your organization or the individuals you're charged with leading.
Exactly. I remember having that excuse me, that same challenge or dilemma, if you will, when I got promoted, and I had this ability to really connect with the members on my team, and oftentimes my team members almost in a sense they enjoyed the vulnerability because it was relatable, but also I can remember a time when one of my team members asked me, could they call me by my first name? And it was really interesting because I thought that's not a good idea,
Right.
And I really had a dilemma going on, and I was like, man. But I'll tell you what I did, and I know maybe there are people that would disagree, but what I did was, I told that person, as I said, is I don't have a problem with you calling me by my first name, but if you ever slip up and you do that at work or in a disrespectful tone or whatever, then it's going to be all bets off. And that was what I did. Now, what I can say is it never happened. They were all respectful. Some never addressed me by my first name. There were a few that did when we were off duty or depending on what we were doing. But what I can say is that group of people, to this day, I always say that they were the best soldiers that I ever had. And when I say that I could ask them to do anything, they did it. They did it, and they made my experience as a leader enjoyable because I didn't have to fight with them because they saw me as, yes, he's a leader, but he's relatable. He cares about, and I'm using the word care, he cares about me first as a person. And it goes back to one of my favorite quotes by Dr. John Maxwell is people don't care what you know until they know that you care. And that is something that leaders have to keep in the forefront of their imagination is you could have whatever bit of knowledge, you could have whatever bit of degrees, you could have so much experience, but if people feel like you don't care, especially the generation today, that's the number one thing that these newer generations are looking for. Do you care about me as a person? Or do you want me to just perform so that it can benefit you? Because if all you want me to do is perform so it can benefit you, I'm out. But when they know that you care about them, that they can come and talk to you about something that may be going on in their lives, has nothing to do with the organization and the mission or whatever. When they feel like, okay, you care about me as a person, you care about my success on the job, you've taken time out to teach me things that I need to know without judgment. This is where we have to get as leaders. And so I bring that up because that was just my experience, but I realized that some people may have handled it a different way. And I get that, but for me, it worked. So that's my personal story. Go ahead.
Yeah, and that, like you were saying, I can see in a situation where you can, well, someone will probably ask you, "Can I call you by your first name?" But that's not in a meeting, right? That's not in a highly professional area. But that, like you say, you all were out at a, it was probably a one-on-one situation, and that individual just wanted to feel comfortable sharing, and wanted to talk to you as a person instead of being a boss, right? And I think that that's what allowed that individual to actually open up and share with you at the level in which they did. So good job on you. Way to go, man. Way to go.
All right. Excuse me. Discuss, talk about some challenges and misconceptions about vulnerability in leadership. Because as we discussed this, I know you've heard some if you're vulnerable, that means you're a weak leader. That's one that I've heard.
Right. Right.
You've always got to put on this.
So one of the things that we can look at is a common, like you were saying, a common
Yeah. So here we go again, but we're going to keep on going.
What were we saying? Okay, can you hear me?
No, go ahead. I'll come back in. Go ahead.
Yeah. So what I was saying is that a common misconception is that vulnerability will lead to a loss of respect, right? However, when done appropriately, it can actually enhance respect and relatability. And that's one of the things that we can, that's a common one. And then we also have where leaders often fear that being vulnerable may open them up to attacks and undermine their authority. But in reality, right, it can strengthen a team loyalty and trust. It's just a matter of being able to know when to do it, right? And balancing that, walking that line.
Like what you said earlier, it's good to have a mentor, because when you don't know when to be vulnerable or how vulnerable to be, you can take that to your mentor, and you can take that situation to them, and then you can get some feedback on it. Because sometimes, one person said, sometimes you have to think with other people's mind. When you don't know what to say, when you don't know what to do, you don't even know how to think. Sometimes you have to think with other people's mind. That means you have to go to them and you have to share, you have to be vulnerable, and you have to say, here is where I am and I'm not sure what to do. And then again, you can't do that with everybody, but it's up to you to be able to designate that person, that personal group that you can bring things to get feedback on, to make better decisions.
Yeah, and I understand what you're talking about, because one of the things that as I mentor individuals, and I even mentor my nephews and stuff like that, and I tell them I have good answers, and if my answer works for you, then you can use it. But if it doesn't work for you, then that's fine. But I have some good answers that I know works and have worked well. And so it's okay to be able to be vulnerable with your mentor and using his answer, right, for the situation so that you can continue to be successful. And I think that that's important. And that's a key thing, that being vulnerable can play in your as a strength for you. Is it opens up answers that you probably wouldn't have had you not been vulnerable.
Exactly. So how would you encourage, and we'll just say our listeners and viewers, how would you encourage them to reflect on their own leadership style, and then consider ways to incorporate vulnerability into their leadership?
Oh, beautiful. I have a couple, but I'll share this one here, right? So one thing I would do is I would encourage listeners to regularly ask themselves what they fear sharing with their team and why, right? And then using those insights to gently push the boundaries to openness, right? And so then that's a good thing that you can do. And then the other part is having that alone time and reflect on moments when being more open could have led to a better outcome, and consider small, manageable ways to start incorporating such openness moving forward. And that is so powerful, because oftentimes when we look at scenarios that we thought would have gone wrong but ended up turning out okay, I often challenge individuals to go back to that scenario, and the moment that you thought it was going to go bad, think that it's going to go well, and then walk it out as though it has gone well. And so now when you're changing this perspective of looking at things negatively, but start looking for the positive in being vulnerable, and then seeing that it has actually worked to your advantage. And I think that's important.
Exactly. And I want to say, for leaders out there that feel like that you have to have the answer to everything, that you always have to put on the best performance, that you always have to, that there's no room for you to learn, there's no room for you to make a mistake, there's no room for you to fail. Like, you have to be on, like, every day, 24/7. And I get it, because there's a certain image you want to have, there's a certain way that you want to appear and be actually with your team. But vulnerability is key. You have to be able to say, like you were talking about earlier, I don't have all the answers. I'm not the smartest person in the room. In fact, you're here because I'm not the smartest person. In fact, if I am the smartest person, we might as well just leave the room right now, right? So we've got to be vulnerable enough with our team members to say, I don't have all the answers. What do you think?
Mm-hmm.
And not think that, and not be a person who always has to receive the credit. Share the credit with your team.
Mm-hmm.
Say that, I didn't have a clue what I was doing, and this person really stepped up and really showed me a new way of doing, handling this project, a new way of dealing with another team member, whatever the case. Because what that shows people is, okay, you are willing to learn,
Mm-hmm.
and you're willing to include everybody that's on your team. It's not just, it's not just me. It's not about me, but it's about the team, and it's about the overall performance of the group and whatever the mission or goal is that we're trying to accomplish. So I think a part of that, excuse me, a part of vulnerability is definitely admitting that you don't have all the answers, that you may not be the best person to consult about something or lead a project. Yeah, sure, you may have the overall responsibility. But you can still have the overall responsibility and strategically use your team members according to their strength.
Right. Absolutely. You're absolutely right. Good stuff, man.
So, well, we are coming down to what, our last 4 minutes. I don't know if you can hear it, but I have a pet in the background that's making a lot of noise. So, yeah, very excited, husky. So, this was a great conversation, and I'm sure we're going to talk more about it on another note. But what I want is give us your last thoughts about vulnerability in the context of leadership.
Beautiful. My closing thought is that I want to encourage individuals to be present in the moment and understand that when situations come up, that you just need the best answer for that moment. And being able to collectively bring your team together to get the best answer for that moment, then that will foster team cohesiveness and give you different experiences that you can live with, right? And again, like you can always go back to and say that was the best answer for that moment. And if I have someone who is working on my team who had the best answer for that moment and I went with it, right? I can live with that. I can live with that because that appeared to me, based on my skill sets and abilities, that was the best answer for that moment. And to be able to have your team trust and know that I can share with the boss and he'll use my answer and he'll give me the credit. This is going to take you leaps and bounds with which is going to create, build a culture where individuals will want to stay, right? The retainment of employees and team members will actually, you can contribute that to it. So you may be able to reduce turnover, the climate, the workspace. All those things could happen when you keep at the forefront. How do we as a team get the best answer for right now, for this moment here? And then that way you can continue to have a really good team.
That's great. That's great. While you were talking, I was just thinking, as you were saying, you chose the best answer at the time. And it just reminds me, because our team, they come together and they have their strengths and their answers, and we call them gifts, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it just makes me think of a message I heard several years ago, and the preacher was talking about the best gift.
Mm-hmm.
And he said the best gift is the gift that's needed at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the same thing. The best answer. It's the best answer that's needed at the time. It doesn't matter who it comes from. It doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter who it comes from, whether they're, a senior employee, a lower level, mid-management, whatever. If that's the answer, if that's the gift that's needed at the time, that leader has to be able to be vulnerable enough to say, hey, you know what? It may not be my idea. It may not be my answer. It's the best answer and it's the best gift. And we're going to choose the best method to carry this thing out so that we can produce and perform and meet our strategic goals, our organizational goals, not only that, our individual goals. So as you were talking about that, I just thought, that's what I thought about. I thought it was awesome. So, man, we could go on talking about vulnerability probably for another hour, but this has been a great, great conversation. I really hope that the listeners and viewers out there have gotten something from this. I hope that you would go back and view it again, because as I do when we go off the air, I will typically review these podcasts over and over again. And because as you're doing this, you may miss something. So I go back and listen, and I tell you, I hear things that I didn't hear. I think things that I didn't think. And I'm like, wow, this is great. And it's awesome. And I'm just glad that you were able to come on and discuss this topic. So Champ Franklin, thank you once again. Before we go, I need you to tell our listeners and viewers where they can find you outside of Dr. Whitty today.
Oh, beautiful. Well, the best place to reach me is at champfranklinspeaks.com. And you can contact me through my website. You can also reach me at Champ Franklin Speaks on Instagram and Champ Franklin Speaks on Facebook. So those how you can reach me.
All right. So you just heard, we talked about embracing vulnerability as leaders. Like I said, please go back and listen, view over and over again. It was awesome. I'm just still thinking about some of the things that we talked about. So coming up on our next show, I want to say it is August the 19th. We are going to have an awesome guest that's going to be talking about planned maturity. His name is Marquise Trent. You don't want to miss that episode. That book is the book that we all wish we had when we were teenagers. And so it's a great book. I want you guys to join in. Champ Franklin, make sure that you stand by, because we still have the after show. We might have another party. But it was exciting. So thank everybody out there for tuning in to Dr. Whitty today. We hope that, well, before I say that, you can reach me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, X, and also on YouTube. Or you can also visit my website at www.drwhitty.org. That's where you can find me. Send me an email at drwhitty@yahoo.com, and I will check it out and I will reply. But don't send me no hate mail, because I'm not going to listen. All right. So we hope that your mind, body, and spirit has gone to college, and we'll see you next time on Dr. Whitty Today. Thank you for tuning in.
Thank you for joining us on Dr. Whitty Today. We appreciate your time, and your viewership is the heartbeat of our show. If you enjoyed this episode, hit the like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and most importantly, subscribe. Your support keeps us going, and we can't wait to have you back. So hit the notification bell to find out each time we air live. Until then, stay curious, stay inspired, stay motivated, and stay tuned.